We are in our last chapter, our last session, and in this session we're going to be talking about performance in general, and we're going to be talking about data. Now, I want to start off by saying that we're going to jump into Chrome because the tools in Chrome are the tools that we're going to be using to do profiling at a later video. What I want to do is I want to talk briefly about, well, not that briefly to be honest, it's a little bit long, but it's very, very powerful, very, very, very good stuff. We're going to be talking about on your server, you have to do a lot of stuff if it's from a security perspective, if it's from any other reason. But you want to push to the client side a lot of the things to avoid contacting the server when you don't have to. And beyond that, to let the user do all the work, as much as the work as you can, because then you're pushing the load onto more than just your server. So if the user could pitch in and help, then you're reducing the load on your server, improving the speed of your application in general. So it's not only about making JavaScript faster, it's making your whole application holistically faster, and communicating less with your server will make it faster, because less communication with the server means what? It means that you're going to spend less time on the most valuable resource you have, which is your server. So let's jump into it, see what I mean. And in this case, we're going to validate forms. Even though we're going to do these validations on the server as well, we're going to make sure that we're going to send the right data onto the server. So that way there won't be a chance that our server will need to go through this validation process more than once. And we definitely don't want to send the same thing to our server 10 times. That is really not cost effective with a server. So let's do it. I created a sample just to showcase something very simple. Now, although your server side is validating this new email subscription that I've created here because you don't want people to be able to add stuff onto your server, this is not very efficient because we're traveling to the server back and forth. Now, it doesn't really matter if you're creating a beautiful API for it or you're redirecting people to a new page, you're still creating an overload on your system. What we want to do is, instead of that, we want to capture and validate that the submission form here is really empty before we move on. Now, to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my form that I've created while you were away in between chapters, and I want you to go right into the input section where this email is. Now, what I'm going to go ahead here is just add another attribute, and this attribute is called required. And I'm just going to set the value to be empty, or set the value to be the words required. It doesn't really matter. As long as I'm setting something there, it's going to make sure that our item is required. Now, if I go ahead and I click on refresh on my application, this time around, if I try to submit something when it's empty, it's going to tell me, it's going to give me an error validation telling me, please fill out this field. Now, with that said, if you're running on a browser that does not support HTML5 yet, then it's not going to work. So assuming that we have HTML5 for now, and in the next lecture, we're going to talk about how do you create a backup plan for users that don't have HTML5 capabilities. But even before we do that, if someone types in something here like my name and clicks on to join, that's not a valid field. And again, I'm going to get an error message once I create here a submission. So to solve this problem, what you're going to want to do is you're going to go back into the editor, and instead of setting the type to be text, we're going to go ahead and set it to be email. Now, this is really the heart of this lecture. It's relatively short, and it's really about when you're creating forms, and anything else really, try to push the logic onto the client side as much as you can. Yes, from security reasons, you have to do it on the server as well, but you want to avoid traveling to the server as much as you can. So in this case, if someone doesn't type in something, we don't want to go to the server at all. If someone types something, but that something is not valid, then we want to capture it even before the user moves on. By doing so, we're basically enabling a smoother application, less lag, less hit on our server, and the less we're hitting the server, and the more the user is working on their own system, the better it is for us, because then we're going to be cutting down dramatically the amount of hits on our application on our server, and by that we're going to improve the performance of our application. Now, as this course in general, this whole pile of lectures is all about JavaScript, in the next lesson we're going to talk about how do you create a validator that would work for you even if our application doesn't support, if our browser doesn't support HTML5 validation rules. And we're going to look into that in the next lecture.